All right, everyone. So we have the full spoilers for the upcoming chapter of Boruto to Blue Vortex. This is chapter 21. And I'm going to go over some of them here in this video. And I'm just going to give you guys just a quick heads up. All right. If you're watching this video and if you are someone who is not really okay with people being a little bit negative about Boruto, then I'm just going to warn you that you are probably not going to enjoy this video. Now, I'm not going to get into this now. I'm going to go over some of the spoilers and give you some of my thoughts on it. But obviously, I'm going to save most of my thoughts for the actual review when the official chapter comes out, because usually with these spoilers, while they are, they do tell you what happens in the chapter, there's still obviously a lot of context missing. So, as always, I wait until we get the full chapter because with the dialogue and the actual art itself, you get the full picture, and we don't really have that now. At least as I am, or excuse me, at least when I'm recording this video. Sorry, just having a little bit of trouble speaking. At least when I'm recording this video right now, we don't actually have any raw scans. And even then, a lot of those still have a lot of context missing. So that's why I usually, wait for the full chapter to get released. So that way we do have full context and we get some stuff that the full chapter spoilers, don't actually give us. So yeah, just want you to keep that in mind because unfortunately, as always, when it comes to these spoilers, people tend to jump the gun and they usually miss a lot of context. And then, when the chapter officially comes out and they do get full context, then immediately a lot of their concerns are addressed. And you might be thinking, okay, well, aren't you kind of doing the same thing by maybe being a little bit negative? Well, actually, this is one thing that the chapter is not going to address. And it's, in my opinion, not just a problem with this chapter, it's a problem for me just with Two Blue Vortex overall. And it's something that's been bothering me for a while. And it's something that I do hope they address at some point in the future. But right now, it's just not there. It's just not happening. And I need to talk about it. And maybe I might make a full dedicated video on that in particular, but I'll just talk about it a little bit here. And maybe I'll get into it a little bit when I give my full thoughts on the chapter in the official chapter review that I'm going to put out. So, with that said out of the way, let's get into some of these spoilers. Now, as a lot of us pretty much predicted, this chapter does show us what Sarada's Mangekyo Sharingan power actually is. And it is pretty, I'm not going to lie, it is pretty powerful, which isn't really surprising. I mean, if you think about every Mangekyo Sharingan power we've seen so far, all of them have been pretty damn powerful. They're so powerful to the point where unless you are someone who has, incredible power, or if you're someone who has a hacks ability yourself, you're not going to be able to defend yourself against the Mangekyo Sharingan abilities. So, not really surprising that she has this pretty powerful ability. And we find out that her ability is she can create black holes. And she can't just make one, she can make multiple. And she can actually choose what specifically gets affected by its gravitational pull. And in this case, she picks Ryu. And from what we understand, she herself is also a little bit affected by it, at least with some of the spoilers that we have. They state that Sarada is actually floating. Again, we don't know. This is why, again, it's important to wait for the chapters to officially get released. That way we get the art and everything. We get full context so we actually know what's going on. I don't think that her ability is going to give her the ability to fly because, as far as we know, only Otsutsuki or people who have been gifted with six-path power have been able to actually use the ability to fly. So personally, I don't think that Sarada is going to be able to fly using her ability, because if that's the case, then she won't be able to use it for very long, because if it's tied to her using her Mangekyo Sharingan, then eventually it's going to go away, just like what happens with pretty much every person who uses the Mangekyo Sharingan. Eventually they're going to lose their eyesight, and then either they get a transplant, or if they don't have someone to give them a transplant, then they basically are going to be blind forever. So yeah, I don't think that she's actually able to fly just based on what we have. I think that it's just her being affected by the gravity and just lifting her up. Again, this is just based off what we're seeing. Obviously, again, we'll have the full context with the chapter when it officially gets released. So her using this ability, she is able to defeat Ryu. So Ryu does get defeated in this chapter. And it's not just Ryu. we find out later on in the chapter that Matsuri also gets defeated by Boruto. So yeah, for anyone out there who was hoping that this is going to not involve Boruto, that Boruto wasn't going to be involved at all, that it's just going to be the other characters for once, and it's essentially the story making it a little bit more interesting by finding a way to keep Boruto out of it and having the other characters figure out a way to solve their issue without Boruto coming in and just saving everyone. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen because Boruto does get involved and he basically saves Konohamaru from being killed by Matsuri. So yeah, Konohamaru doesn't die, which I think, again, a lot of people predicted. I think myself included. I think, yeah, I did say in the video where I talked about my general thoughts about the chapter, I think I did say that I didn't expect Konohamaru to die. And it turns out, yeah, that is indeed what happened. Although one death that does get confirmed is Yodo. So for anyone who expected Yodo to survive, unfortunately, it seems, at least again, just going off the spoilers, that that is absolutely not the case. Yodo is apparently dead. And Kashin Koji knew that was going to happen, and he knew that it was going to happen and that he wanted it to happen because it was going to lead to Sarada awakening her Mangekyo Sharingan power. And apparently, according to him and what he's seen with 10 Directions, her power is going to be necessary. And we saw in the flashback page that got released on the official Naruto website that Sasuke also came to this conclusion that her Mangekyo Sharingan power was going to be very useful. And just based on what we see it do in this chapter, it seems like, yes, it is going to be useful. But like I said, because it's tied to her Mangekyo Sharingan, she's going to have to be very careful when and where to use it, because obviously she can't just spam the ability. Otherwise, she's fucked, basically, to just be 100% blunt, because if she loses her ability, she doesn't have someone to essentially transplant Sharingan eyes to her, because her dad only has one, and I don't think if she just gets his one Sharingan eye, that is going to reawaken the sight in both her eyes, and she's going to get the EMS. I don't think that's how that works. Although Kishimoto has retconned things in the past, so it wouldn't be surprising if he introduces some reason to essentially retcon that lore and have Sarada gain the EMS. I would not be surprised. It wouldn't be the first time. So obviously, we're going to have to wait and see what happens there. So yeah, both Ryu and Matsuri are killed in this chapter. And yeah, Boruto went to the battlefield. And just like Kashin Koji said, if Boruto shows up, then that's when Jura's going to show up. And it seems like that's what the end of the chapter is leading to. It literally ends with Jura saying that Boruto finally showed up, and maybe Jura is going to show up in the next chapter. Now, either this will lead to a fight between Boruto and Jura. We're going to have to wait and see. I've seen some people predict that maybe Kawaki is going to show up. That's where Kawaki is going to be reintroduced into the story. And that's where we will see Kawaki's new power, with him having his limiters removed and then whatever other modifications that Amato ends up using. So with all that said and out of the way, now let me get to what my issue is with Boruto in general that I said I was going to talk about. So as you know, we talked about here, both the Shinju, Ryu and Matsuri have lost. And my biggest issue right now is, while here's the thing. Okay, let me just add some context. I did say in the video that I did about the previous chapter where, I just gave my overall thoughts. I said that I really like the writing that's been done with the Awakened Shinju. And in my opinion, they're the most interesting part of Boruto 2 Blue Vortex. And if I'm being honest, they are kind of the only reason why I'm even still reading it, because they, like, what they, could be done with them, I think could honestly, like, really, really make this story so much more interesting. And just based on what we're seeing recently with the Awakened Shinju, not just here with Ryo and Matsuri, but also before with Jura and Hidari, I have to be honest, I'm honestly getting a little bit worried that the Awakened Shinju are just going to end up being disappointing, because we have now had two instances where the Awakened Shinju have gone out to achieve their goal, and twice now they've been stopped. And in both cases, it involved Boruto basically showing up and just saving the day. Just showing up and saving the day. Now, in one instance, it wasn't Boruto, it was someone else, which thankfully we did get that at least. But at the same time, we are at a point, I think, where we need to see the awakened Shinju be a legitimate, credible threat. Because up until this point, the story keeps telling us that, hey, these guys are a threat. It keeps telling us that, hey, we need to stop them, that they are dangerous, and that we need to not underestimate them. We keep being told all of these things, but we're never actually legitimately shown any of it. Every time the awakened Shinju, outside of Jura, we'll leave Jura outside of it because, his one instance of being shown, although, he did actually look good, but again, to be fair, it was against Himawari. And while she did have power without question, at the same time, she was someone who wasn't really all that trained in being a shinobi. And it's just, to me, not enough to legitimately establish Jura as being, the big bad. Like, again, you can tell us as much as you want, but at some point you have to actually show us. And that for me has been the biggest issue when it comes to the Awakened Shinju. I like everything else that they've been doing with them, but my biggest problem is that the story keeps telling us that these guys are problems, but every time they go up against the heroes, they get their asses kicked. And to me, it's just like they're starting to lose credibility as actual threats. Okay. Ryu, for a moment, I thought that maybe they were going to do something different with him, that they were actually going to have him win, that maybe the good guys are going to have to actually take the loss, and then maybe they'll have to go regroup, come back, and then get the win. But no, they get the win. And it's just, here's the thing. I understand that the story does explain that this is Kashin Koji carefully setting everything up in order for everything to go well in their direction. I understand that. But at some point, you have to break that, because right now, for me at least, there are no actual stakes in the story. I, at no point reading Boruto 2 Blue Vortex, have ever once thought that any of these characters have ever been in any legitimate threat. I've never once believed that any character could actually die. And then when we finally do get a character who seemingly dies, honestly, I still don't believe it. I need to actually see like a funeral or something with Yodo, because apparently, according to this chapter, Kashin Koji fully expected Yodo to get killed because he wanted her sacrifice to be what pushes Sarada to awaken her power, because that's going to be necessary and all that. But at the same time, out of all the characters you could have killed, why is it Yodo? Because let's just be honest. And this isn't coming from someone who hates the character. Okay, I'm not one of these people who like irrationally hates Yodo. I understand that she's made some mistakes and that she's essentially, like part of the reason why a lot of this is happening. But I don't hate her. I think she's actually a very interesting character. But at the same time, she's a character who, at least in the manga, has only shown up once, disappeared, and then reappeared years later for a few chapters, and then gets killed off. Like this isn't really. This isn't like, if this is meant to evoke some kind of emotion from the audience, they're kind of failing at doing that, in my opinion, because I don't think that there's anyone out there who was that emotionally attached to this character like a lot of people are to other characters. And if you are trying to essentially like get some emotions out of the audience, out of us, the readers, or at least for me specifically, okay, I'll speak for myself. I won't speak for anyone else. For me personally, you need to do that to a character that is at least a little bit more important. And I understand that with some characters, and it doesn't even have to be a main character. It doesn't have to be Boruto, Sarada, or Mitsuki. I understand they're the main three. Nothing's going to happen to them, just like with Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura in the Naruto manga. I'm completely, like, at least I've accepted the fact that nothing's going to happen to them because they are the main three of Boruto. So fine, okay, they're off the table. But at the very least, two other characters from like Boruto's generation have something happen to them. And no, not Yoda doesn't count because she's from the Sand Village. I'm talking about from Konoha. Like, you could have killed off Inogen. Like, you could have done that, but Inogen got saved. And again, in this story, it made sense because, you know, Himawari was there. She had Kurama and his healing powers. So, okay, even if it makes sense, again, it's just one of those things that you are doing that's just making me not feel like there's any sort of stakes in the story. Right now, I am never at any point of the thought that any of these characters are in any actual danger. And then the moment you do kill off a character, it's a character that's been gone for a while and then just recently showed up. It's like, why Yodo of all people did you kill? I mean, is it just that you just wanted to kill off someone and you were just too afraid to do it to any of the characters that we actually know, that we spent years with? I don't know. To me, it's just, it feels kind of cheap. right? I mean, here's the thing: even if you kill off like specific characters, I know a lot of people wouldn't have liked it, but it would have at least elicited a more emotional response from people. Like, think about what happened with Kurama when he quote unquote died, right? It actually got an emotion out of people, even though people didn't like it. That's kind of the point. Someone that they liked, a character that they liked in a story, was now written off, at least seemingly at the time, permanently. And so basically, you actually did your job as a writer. You killed off a character and you actually had it affect people. So in other words, what you did worked. But if you're doing this now with Yodo, it's like, I mean, really, I mean, again, this is a character that a lot of people, I'm willing to bet, probably forgot even existed in the story. I mean, come on, let's be honest. I mean, again, I don't hate her. I actually like the character and what we've been getting from her. But at the same time, out of all the characters you could have killed, why her? And like, I don't know. It's just, to me, it's just this is again just part of the issues with Boruto, in my opinion, is that it's really afraid to have actual stakes in the story. And we did kind of get that with Naruto. Like in Naruto, even though it was a shonen, at the same time, I think Kishimoto did a good job of at least making it seem like there are actual stakes. And if I'm being honest, this kind of like got sort of pulled back in Shippuden. Like, this was honestly one of my issues with Shippuden, if I'm being honest. Every time I think back to it, is that a lot of the stuff that happened in part one, it didn't really feel like there were any actual consequences. Not everything, but a lot of it. Like, for example, and I've talked about this before, in part one, when Lee got injured, I think that should have been a permanent injury. I think that should have been permanent, and it's something that stayed with the story up until now. For example, I think that's something that should have stayed with them, and again, showing us that there are actual consequences to characters' actions. Again, not everything, but there are a lot of things that Kishimoto did in part one. Excuse me, just had to clear my throat for a minute. But yeah, he did a lot of things in part one that he kind of walked back on in part two. And then now in Boruto, we're just sort of continuing that. And it's a little bit disappointing. And we are, without question, getting that with the Awakened Shinju. Again, like, we haven't seen them literally do anything that makes them feel like legitimate threats, at least in my opinion. And it probably doesn't help that every time they're about to do something, you just have Super Boruto show up and then boom, just solves everything. And it's like, if you, again, want these beings to feel like actual threats, you can't just have it to where every time they're about to accomplish like a goal, or at least they're about to do something that makes them feel like an actual threat, you just have Deus Ex Boruto show up and just solve everything. It's just, you can't keep doing this because it's going to get annoying. It's honestly, it's annoying for me already. And I obviously, again, can't speak for anyone else, but you at some point, you have to pull the trigger on having them actually accomplishing their goal. Okay, you can't keep having the Awakened Shinju talk about accomplishing their goal of absorbing their target and so on and so forth, and just not have that happen. You can't just blue ball your readers. Okay, at some point you have to pay this off. And yes, it might lead to some characters dying, but here's the thing. Sometimes stories do need that. And again, I'm not saying that these characters should die because I don't like them. This isn't coming from a place of, oh, I don't like these characters, just kill them off or whatever. No, this is coming from a place of, I want the story to really, like, essentially fulfill, how do I say this? I want the story to essentially accomplish what I think it can accomplish. And again, sorry, and I know that kind of sounds a little bit pretentious, if I'm being honest, but I think that if this story does essentially follow through on some of the things that it sets up, like, again, the Shinju actually absorbing their targets, then I think that it would just make the story so much more interesting. Again, for me personally, if you're watching this and you disagree with this, that's absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But for me personally, and why this is starting to just annoy me, and if I'm being honest, it's just starting to kind of piss me off a little bit, is that every time it seems like they're going to do something with the Awakened Shinju, they just end up getting their asses kicked. Okay, I mean, oh boy. While I personally don't think that this is like the end of Ryo and Matsuri. I mean, we'll have to wait and see. I mean, they're obviously setting up Jura to show up, so maybe he's going to show up and he's going to grab the thorn souls of both Ryu and Matsuri before Boruto or anyone else manages to get them. Maybe that will happen, but at the same time, it's like their first actual fight in the series, just like with Hidari, they end up losing. And for me, like that just makes them so much less impactful as villains. It's it's never a good idea to introduce villains in your story, and the very first thing we see them do when they get into an actual fight, in the case of like a shonen battle series, right? Since this is shonen, we'll stick to this. In the case of a shonen battle series, you can't have your villains first actual fight and be one where they actually lose. So for example, take a look at Dragon Ball, for example. Since Ikimoto is clearly taking a lot of inspiration from Dragon Ball, right? You know, take a look, for example, what happened with Nappa, right? Or with Nappa and Vegeta when they first got introduced, right? With Nappa, when he first got introduced, you had all the Z fighters jumping him, and he just took them all out like they were nothing. And obviously, it took until Goku finally shows up to actually do something, right? And that sort of like continued on the thread of Goku showing up at the end of the day, up until we got to the fight against Cell, and that's where Toriyama flipped it and had someone else be the hero. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why that arc always sticks with people, is that not only does it pay off a lot of things, but it also kind of flips that trope that we got from Dragon Ball up until that point, where the main character always shows up at the end and just saves the day, right? And the thing is that even in Dragon Ball, while you did have moments of that happening, there were also a lot of moments where Goku just didn't show up at the end of the day to save where the other characters had to essentially solve the situation themselves. And you had an opportunity to do this here, and instead, no, Boruto just shows up again and, just saves the day. And obviously, to bring it back to the example with Nappa, I think that that's what you kind of needed here. You needed one of the Awakened Shinju to show up and just basically run through everyone. And with Ryu, we were getting that up until Sarada got her power up, and then just boom, he gets taken out. Like it's nothing. And it's just, again, just so disappointing. It's disappointing because it's happened again, and I don't know again where they're going to take the story. I don't know if this is going to be the end of like Ryu and Matsuri. But if I'm being honest, if they're just going to keep doing this with them, then you know what? Just take them out of the story. Just have Boruto and the others take their Thorn Souls and just have them free, what was her name? Moegi, and have them free Shinki. Just do it. Just don't bring them back to the story if you're just going to have them, again, go into a fight and just get their asses kicked. And it's just, I don't know. Again, like, sorry, this was kind of rambling. Just wanted to, like I said, kind of get my thoughts out there. Boy, this went on for way, way longer than I I originally planned it to be. I'm just gonna post this, and I'll just let whatever happens. I know there's probably gonna be a lot of people who are not gonna like this or whatever, because there's a lot of people out there who really, really don't like people not being nice to Boruto as a series. I don't know why. It's like, my God. I mean, I understand being passionate about stories, but I swear to God, there's some people who take it way, way too far. But anyway, guys, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Whatever they are, just tell me about them. And while you're here, if you did enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like, share the video out there, and subscribe if you are new, if you enjoy this content. And I hope I'll see you guys for my next video. Bye for now.